Seems like everybody went to Jacksonville.
We should all squeeze in.
Yeah, everybody squeeze in. Come closer. There's lots of room today. Let's all feel near to each other. Anybody in the hallways, please make your way inside. Service is starting on time, promptly. Beautiful. 8:11. Been talking for a minute. But praise God we could all be here today.
Good job, sir.
Don't know what to answer to that.
Just say thank you.
I just want to share a little bit with you guys. Today has been such a weird and tiring day. Does anybody else feel like their week was thrown off because of Memorial Day? Mine was every day just I couldn't wake up. I don't know why. It was just every week starts Monday, go, and go. And now it's just, I don't know, it's not going. And today was probably the worst day. I thought Friday, it'd be a really good day, get a lot of things done. It was total opposite. Came to church for prayer. I casted everything to the throne of God. I'm like, Lord, I want to worship you and not think about anything else right now. And that's what I want to encourage all of you guys to do. Let's all stand and give everything into God's hands, all of our thoughts, all of even our weakness, and just whatever we're feeling. Maybe we're feeling tired. Maybe we're just, I'll skip out. I won't listen today. I'll just zone out. No, we came here for a reason, to hear from God. And I believe that He has something powerful to say to all of us tonight. And it's our job to have ears to hear. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. I just pray that we'll all just receive Him tonight. Let's just pray that God will just bless this service. Let's pray. Lord, thank you that we could be here today, this evening, Lord, as a congregation. Lord, we could be here. And I just thank you, Lord, for bringing us throughout this week, Lord, even though for some of us, for myself speaking, it's been a tiring week and just not really productive, Lord. And God, I just want to lay everything before your throne, God. Right now at this time, Lord, as we just prepare our hearts to receive whatever you have to say to us tonight, Lord, I pray, God, that you would just take out all those thoughts in our minds, Lord, that are just weighing us down, Lord God. All those thoughts in our minds, Lord, that are just hindering us from worshiping you, God. I pray, Lord, you just take them all out, God, in the name of Jesus, Lord. I pray, God, just help us, Lord, to worship you, God, in spirit and truth, Lord God. And I just pray, Lord, that you will just be here in this evening, Lord. God, be this evening with us all. And I pray, Holy Spirit, to speak to us. Speak to every single one of our hearts in this time, in this evening. And I pray, let us all just be receiving and have ears to hear what you have to say tonight, Lord. Just pray this in your name. Amen.
constant grace remains the cornerstone. Things that we thought were dead are breathing in life again. You are the sun to shine on darkest night. For all that you've done, we will pour out our hearts. This will be our anthem song. Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. The hopeless have found their hope. The orphans now have a home. All that was lost has found its place in you. You lift our weary head. You make us strong instead. devotion poured out on the feet of Jesus. Our affection, our devotion poured out on the feet of Jesus. Our affection, our devotion poured out on the feet of Jesus. Our affection, our devotion poured out on the feet of Jesus. We love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. Our hearts adore. Our hearts adore. Our hearts adore. Hallelujah, Jesus. Jesus, we thank you for letting us come this time, God. That we could just gather in your name, God. That we could gather freely for the reason just to come together to praise your name, Jesus. And we bow our knees, God. We humble our hearts that you give us this opportunity. That you give us this opportunity to praise you for creating us, for redeeming us, for giving us the Holy Spirit, for leading us in our lives, God. For giving us the strength to overcome, for giving us the will to follow your will, Jesus. For giving us the desire and the burden to follow your will, Jesus. And I thank you for being with us, for being in this place right now, because you are literally here, God. And I pray, God, that you'd open up our hearts and that you would accept our worship, God. Oh, Jesus, we worship you, God.
Need you more than yesterday. I need you more. More words can say
just come before you, and this is our prayer before the service starts, God, that we need you more. We've come here so we could know you more. We've come here so you could speak to our hearts. We've come here so you could reveal to us something new, something more about yourself, something that you want to tell us in a way that we should live our lives, Jesus, in a way that we should praise you, God. And right now, before the service starts, we just proclaim with all of our hearts, Jesus, that we don't have enough of you, we need you more. Oh God, I pray for this service, a blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Greetings to your youth. Who's happy to be here? Amen. Thank you for the worship. That was really good. So, first of all, I'd like to ask you guys, who here brought a physical Bible today? Can you raise it up? Just gotta check, make sure it's right. Okay. Praise God. Who here has their Bible apps? Who's not using a physical Bible? Gotta get a physical Bible. No, but first of all, I just want to say the great thing about having your own Bible is it's something that's like, it's almost like a friend, because it's something that you, when you carry around, it's the Word of God, it's a treasure. And when you actually, have that Bible that you use constantly and that you learn from constantly, it becomes like, you get, it gains value the more you have it. So that is just, and that's what I want to talk today. I want to talk about the the value of the Word of God and how we need it in our lives. So just in my life lately, God's been showing me that through His Word, I can find the strength to just really stand against the things that often take me down, sin, frankly, like that. Because, when I first started off as a Christian, I had a very hard time picking up the Bible. It's not that, I didn't like the Bible, it's just I would always feel really bored when I read it. I would always, I'd open it, I'd read it, and then okay, I read it, check, just because I felt guilty. But then on New Year's, I got this notification on my phone. It's when I start a yearly plan reading the Bible, I'm yeah, I wanna start trying to read the Word of God, every day. And I started that off. And first week or so, I was reading it and I was kind of getting it done, but it was still kind of like a check, But then, I was just going through some tough stuff spiritually, and just when I pick up His Word to read during the day, I just felt it refresh me. I pick up His Word, I sit down, I read it, and it's a well of just giving you that peace, giving you that joy, that it's something you want to find, in the commotion. And so I just want to read a few verses on how, what the Word of God does. So starting off from Psalm 119:10. It says, I have tried hard, don't let me wander from your commands. I have hidden your word in my heart that I may not sin against you. So this verse was actually the first verse that inspired me to kind of share this word that I'm sharing. It's when I read it, I'm it's just I've hidden His word in my heart that I may not sin against Him. And it's sometimes it's so hard sometimes, just that temptation that draws us, or it's sometimes I just sinned, I have to it's how do I literally kind of just create a barrier with that it's something strong. And then I realize it's having His Word in our hearts. So that's the first thing. It's why is it so important to read His Word? Why is it so important? Because when we put it in our hearts, it helps us to just not sin. before I started reading the Bible much, but I was still wanted to serve God. I was just struggling, like, every day to just stand against that sin. But then when I started reading His Word taught me. His Word gave me strength, and it's something that you can just recall whenever you're in times of trouble. You can be like, quote a verse like, the devil has no power against me because God has died on the cross, and there's like a bunch of verses on that kind of stuff. Like, just anything that's like, you feel weak, God is my strength. And just so many things that you can just always quote His Word if you have it treasured in your heart. So that's the thing, I encourage you guys to always put His Word in your heart, to treasure it. And later in Psalm 19, it also says, I think in verse 105, it says that His Word is a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path. So here we see another very useful aspect of His Word, for it as guidance. One is it helps us to not sin. Two, it gives us guidance. Where we have to go to see. In this dark world, sometimes it's hard to see which path to take, which way is right, which way is righteous and godly. But when we read His Word, we see the path, because we can see through the stories in the Bible and the different situations and what was righteous and godly and what God calls us to do in certain situations. Like in an argument, do we just keep on arguing until we win, or do we be like Jesus Christ and humble ourselves? So we can always trust on His Word to give us wisdom on that. And just, I want to leave you with a verse that is very encouraging, that sometimes, in this world of like temporary stuff, in this world of stuff that's like not very, something that you can't really rely on, but it says in His Word that the grass may wither and the world may fade away, but my word will stand forever. Amen. And just, that's another thing, whenever you need that uplifting, that well, you can always trust in Him with that ever constant word, with that word that does not fall through. And it's just amazing how just in my life, God's been showing me that, like, you can give somebody a cup of water, or you can tell them where the sink is, or the water sources. I was going to say well, but we don't really have wells anymore. But just, you can show them where the well is, and this is the well. His Word is the well of life. You can find yourself, like, prayer is very uplifting, but sometimes it's just His Word that we need, that we're lacking in our lives. Because I know people that can pray, but that can't pick up His Word. It can be just so difficult, because it's a habit we need to learn, to read His Word. And that's something that we need to always strive to do, something in our personal lives. It's not something that we can, say like, I was in church and I read the few verses that the preacher told me to open to. And that's just, it's something that you build, that's how you build your relationship with God, because you can pray and you're just going to be praying. You'll be saying what you want to say. But when you pick up His Word, you really hear what God has to say to you. Amen.
Praise God. By the way, guys, I'm a tech guy, but I didn't know how to turn on a mic. Praise the Lord. I'm so happy to be here. I came here, my name is Paul, by the way. I came here from Portland. I want to share a quick testimony. I came here with Serge Bigun. He moved here with Arena and his new family. Many of you guys know him, but he came back, it's been 5 years. Praise the Lord. But I'm staying with the Biguns right now, and During this trip, I want to quickly share. I see a lot of God will provide. People that have been to God will provide, a lot of familiar faces. Praise the Lord. Anyways, back to the testimony. What I wanted to share with you guys, I did not talk to Dan about the message he wanted to share, but on my heart, I really wanted to share this testimony. We can have our life. In our life, we can do everything. You know, we can have ministry. We can have our jobs. We can have businesses, and we can serve the Lord and say, God, I'm doing this for you, for your sake, for your name, and not at all know God or have fellowship with God, you know. And this is kind of where I was stuck. You know, I grew up in a Christian family. I didn't go through like rehab or missionary school or anything, but because I grew up in, my dad was like, he graduated from theological school in Ukraine, and he raised me as a Christian, but the problem is when I was growing up, I started growing up and I started doing everything. I started doing ministry in church. I did everything as if, you know, it's correct, as if it's right for a Christian to do. But the problem is I never had fellowship with God. I never got down to pray or even the Word of God, you know. I never really looked into the Word of God. Whatever I knew is whatever my dad taught me. And what started happening when I started growing up older and older, and I became more distant from my father, what happened is that I didn't have connection with God. I didn't have the Spirit of God, you know, moving me. It was just me moving in my ministry, that's it. And something God brought, like I went through depression and I went to like a very low life and state in my life. And what happened is in that moment, you know, I realized like who God is. And I had a friend that came over to me and he told me about God. And when I realized who God is and I repented, and I received the Holy Spirit, that's when my life changed. And God started teaching me and showing me like what is fellowship with Him. That it's important to have fellowship, not to just do ministry, to sacrifice everything, but to have fellowship. There's another young man actually in the Bible, if you guys remember, about the young ruler. It's written in Matthew chapter 19. And towards the end, when Jesus was speaking to him, after he said you have to follow all these commands and so on, he says, what else can I do? And Jesus answers to him and says, if you want to be perfect, go sell what you have, give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. You know, the biggest thing like I learned from my experience, from everything God taught me, He showed me, Paul, I don't want all this ministry, I don't want all this sacrifice, I don't want you to like leave everything and become, you know, a poor missionary. No, I want you and your heart. And God taught me like how He thinks and He knows that I'm beautiful and that He loves me, you know, and He wants my heart and fellowship. And if we look, you know, from the beginning of the Bible, that's what God was trying to show humanity, that He just wants fellowship with us, that's all. But man sinned, they turned away from Him. And through the commandments, again, God tried to restore that relationship. And again, man sinned. And finally, He's like, okay, I'll give up my son. Just realize the fact, I just want fellowship with you. And that's kind of what God spoke in my life, like, Paul, get it right. All I want is fellowship with you. And I started learning that, and that's when, like, after I learned that and opened up myself to God, and God really started opening His way to me, I started doing like what God really wants. And that's when God showed me who I am, and because it didn't satisfy me to just be like, by the way, I'm speaking in English, I just realized, does anybody not understand English? Okay, this youth, I think, okay. So going on with my testimony, so I realized that that's not enough to just know Jesus. I want to, like, I came to this point where I love Jesus, and I'm like, God, I want to do something, like this young ruler, I want to do something for you. And God started showing me more, like, that I need to leave away, you know, not be conformed like the rest of the world. Let's say on a nice night, you know, go play a volleyball game, you know, instead of going to church, you know, because it's the right thing to do. It's hot outside, everybody's doing it, why can't I do it? You know, or go watch a nice movie after church, or do that, you know. But God started showing me, like, Paul, this is not how I want you to live. I don't want you to live like this world. I want you to live because you love me and because I loved you. And that's what God started teaching me, and that's the journey I started taking in my life. That's where God started leading me. And after a while, when it wasn't enough, I'm like, God, I don't just want to follow you. It came naturally, like where, God, I want to do something for you. God, here's my hands, here are my feet, here are my eyes, here's my tongue, here's my mind. Take it, sanctify it, and lead me. And God started opening up, and for me it was really hard because I went through school, like probably the many of you. I went through college. I did 2 years of college, and then I did a couple more years and switched careers started in surgical nursing, neurosurgery is what I'm trying to say. And then I went to EMS, that's paramedic, if you guys don't know. And then I went into lifeguarding, and then I went to web development. But when I was doing all of that, it didn't satisfy me because I felt like out of place. I'm like, this is not my place. And I kept on doing that until God really showed me, like He closed the doors for me for school. But at this point, the hardest thing for me is that when I came to God, I had so much logic in my mind. I thought I knew everything, how everything works, that when God tried to teach me His ways, the spiritual ways, I didn't understand it and I couldn't comprehend it. And God started mending on my heart, mending my mind, and showing me His ways, like what is right. Not to be conformed to this world, but to be renewed by the mind. And then, at a moment, like it was really hard for me, I was praying, and the Holy Spirit opens up. He's like, Paul, pack your bags, I'm sending you out. And I'm like, where? And I got so confused. And again, I prayed, and second time. And again, I prayed like a couple days later, and again. And at this moment, I got scared, because I realized it wasn't from myself, from my own mind, but God was speaking to me. And I said, God, at that point I had some debts I needed to pay off. I'm like, God, if you help me pay off these debts, then I will get up and I will go, and this will be a sign. Because for me, I was like really weak spiritually and I didn't understand that. So what God did within a week, at that moment I was working as a web developer, and what happens is people start calling me. I'm not looking for projects to do, but people started calling me, and I was able to do quick website jobs and get the money, to cover all the debts. And what happens is, after a while, I get sent out to Indonesia. I ended up selling my car. I ended up selling everything I had because I'm like, I'm going for life, that's it. I'm going to be a missionary. 9 months passed by, and God led me somewhere else. God really worked on me in the missionary field, but He brought me back and started teaching me what He wants me to do in a church. And I want to encourage you guys, something God opened up to me is that He wants me to be administrator in a church, to work with what He has given me from birth, like He was working on me to work in the church. And I work with the youth and do administration. I encourage you guys, through my testimony, kind of want to encourage you guys, do not give up. Don't be satisfied. Don't be conformed in what you guys are following and what the rest of this world is doing. Learn our relationship with God and what does God want you to do? What is your role? Why did God create you and given you breath? And that's not only to live and just to survive day by day, but to really be filled with the Holy Spirit and to do God's will. Amen? Amen.
Welcome to Cleveland, brother. You here for life or just for a few days? Okay. If he finds a wife, well, brother, you came to the right church, let me tell you that. I have fine young sisters, yeah? Just turn around. Everywhere you look, fine looking sisters, yeah? Amen, Alyssa? You don't believe our sisters are beautiful? That's right. Come on, give an amen over here.
Amen. That's right.
Thank you. So you guys are proud of yourselves or what? God created things what? Beautiful. That's right. You guys don't need to be ashamed that we got beautiful sisters. I don't know what you're all so shy. Or you just or is it awkward in Slavic culture for a married man to say that we have beautiful sisters in the house?
I think you're just making it wrong.
I'm making it more awkward? I'm pretty comfortable, are you? Alright. pretty comfortable. Show you. Oh, see, thank you, sister. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's gonna work right here. What was that? Did you want me to hand you the microphone? Because I feel very comfortable today for some reason. Good evening, everyone. Hallelujah. It's quiet here. So, want to start off with a small story from my life, and we'll do maybe who can quickly distinguish or name the topic of where I'm going. I will give you a prize, maybe like I'll treat you to coffee or something like that. You were peeking in my notes, so you're not allowed. But lately, I've been going to young services here on Fridays, then may have kind of know a little bit of about my style, and you know each preacher has their style and how they preach and what they preach about, and I'm just a more I try to deviate from my normal style, but it doesn't always work out. Nevertheless, overall, whatever I experience in life and what I live through, whatever God is teaching me, that is what I tend to preach about, because it's for me as how God created me as an individual. It's very difficult for me to preach about topics that it seems so far away or so distant or something that I haven't really gone through myself. It's really difficult for me to just preach on a theoretical type level. And so today is one of those type of hands-on, hands-down, get nitty-gritty type of sermon. And so God's been taking my family on a journey, and as I shared last time, excuse me, I believe it was last Friday or the Friday before, about how just out of the blue, God took away 30% of our income of our family. And so God's been teaching me a lot. And so back about 3 years ago, we purchased a house that I thought was very simple. I thought of myself that I've rehabbed or I fixed up so many houses, and this is just another house. And I looked at it and I thought, something simple, I could do it. This is not a big deal. And so as I got into the project, and this is one of the rules in real estate is emotional attachment to a house will get you in trouble. And so I was emotionally attached to this house, which blinded my eyesight to all the imperfections. And they weren't just imperfections, they were structural emergencies that were there. So as I got more into this house, beside the fact that the wall was kind of bowing, it was caving in. And so I actually had to jack up the whole house and replace one side of the foundation, including all the way that's knocked the wall down, had to just the house was without a wall, had to support it, and had to dig down, and then it turns out there's no footer. I don't know, maybe I'm talking a little too much construction, but basically a lot of work and a lot of money at the end of the day for which I wasn't planning. And then at the end of the day, so basically all the drywall came off and everything came out. We totally rebuilt the house, almost like a brand new house. And so obviously with a lot of time and material, there's a lot of money involved. And so we sunk, my family and I, we sunk a lot of money into this house. And we put it on the market, and it wasn't selling. And we had an offer on the house. It sat actually for about a year vacant, and then we finally had an offer on the house. It was a very good offer, but at the end of the day, after a month of the process, there's an appraiser. So somebody else comes out, like an independent person who evaluates the house and says how much it is. So the bank isn't just taking my word for it, or the person who wants to buy the house, but they're taking an independent person who they pay money to you say, you know, how much is this person? And that's what they do as a professional, called an appraiser. And so they appraised our house much less than what the contract was. And obviously that deal fell through. And so my wife and I were just praying, and God, you know, at that time I also just, back then kind of, you know, work wasn't coming through, and we really need to sell this house. And one of my people that I kind of fall back to whenever I need a loan, he actually called me in and says, let's have coffee. And I said, well, what do you need? He said, no, we have to have coffee. And I know when he wants coffee just to have coffee, it means that he wants to seriously say, you know, hey, buddy, it's time to pay up. You know, it can't fund you anymore. And so we had coffee and said, we added up all the times that I borrowed money from him. And he says, yeah, it's a lot of money, even for me. And I said, trust me, it's a lot of money for me too. And so we're praying, and then another offer comes in. And we're like excited, and then they just cancel again. And they say, well, we changed our mind. And this happens, and the house is not selling. It's back on the market, and we are like, we're worried, we're praying. And then the other thing happens where I lose my other job, my side job, and then things kind of get to a point, critical, and we're praying, and probably maybe even my wife is praying more than me, but and then finally another offer comes through, and today was the day where we closed on the house and the deal is done. Amen. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. And so just when we think we're in trouble, at the time where it's most needed, God is faithful. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. God is faithful. And even when we remain sometimes unfaithful, He continues to be faithful. And so I want to talk about the faithfulness of God today and how that applies to our life and how God is faithful in our life. And the thing that we need to look at is the Word of God. Because if we don't believe this Word of God, then there's nothing I can tell you. There's nothing, some kind of fancy words to convince you with any kind of argument to convince you that God is faithful. Because this is His Word. This is the Word that we stand on. This is our foundation. This is the true Word of God. And if we believe this Word, then out of this Word flows everything else which we believe. And then obviously flows out the fact that our God is faithful. And in Numbers 23:9, we read that God is not a man that He should lie. He doesn't need to lie. He doesn't need to convince. Whatever He spoke in this Word is true. And we see His faithfulness repeated over and over and over in the Bible. Just pick any biblical hero, any biblical historical account, and we see God's faithfulness being shown again and again and again. My story relates to our everyday life, how we live our life. We encounter these things every day. Maybe some of you, not so much. You know, you guys are still in school, but we deal with things every day, with our issues with our health, issues with our relationships, issues with our money, whether it's we have a lot of it or a little of it. But these are the things that we deal with every day. And God remains faithful in all these situations. Because God is completely in control. Amen to that? And so, when we talk about the faithfulness of God, there's over 277 times in the Bible it talks about God and Him being faithful, or covenants that he continues to be faithful to with his people. Especially when we talk about the Israelites or the Jewish people. I mean, if we were living back in the 1940s and 1930s, one wouldn't even imagine how these Jewish people who were, hated by Hitler and all that stuff that was going on, and he was going to wipe them off the face of the earth. In the midst of all that, when they were just scattered through various different countries, in the midst of that and out of that is birthed a nation of Jewish people. I mean, it wasn't something that could be conceived, but yet, nevertheless, God made it happen to me. And that is a fulfillment of the prophetic word that was written in this book. That there will come a day that he will gather his people once again. And that happened in 1948. And so when we look at the historical accounts that this book prophesies about, just one that I just mentioned today, that mentioned in 1948 about the Jewish people becoming a state, gives more and more of us proof for us as humans that this book is true, and what it says will happen. And as regards to this topic today that I'm preaching about, the faithfulness of God, that he is faithful. He is faithful. Many times we're not faithful, but he continues to be faithful. And when we examine people in the Old Testament, particularly men that just stand out, men like Noah, and the faithfulness of God to Noah. After so many years, Noah could probably start to question himself, like, is God really going to do this? I mean, I know he said it, but it's kind of been a long time. How is this all going to happen? But God said that I will destroy the earth, and that's what happened. And he remained faithful to Noah because he says, I will save you and your household. And that's exactly what happened. When we look at men like Moses, and he trusted God, and God remained faithful to him. Even when his back was pressed against the wall and with kind of almost no way out. He's got all these Israelites always grumbling and complaining. And then particularly I'm thinking right now about the time when they were pressed against the sea. And then we got Pharaoh's army coming down. And Moses is like, what am I going to do? And he knows what he's going to do. He's going to pray to God, and God gives an answer. He continues. He is faithful. He's always faithful. And literally we see this faithfulness just repeated in the Bible dozens and dozens of times. Any biblical character, any biblical hero that we see in the Bible, we see how God's faithfulness just radiates. It is all throughout Scripture that God continues to be faithful. He cannot change. That is not in his nature. As I read the passage, Numbers 23:9. God is not a man that he should lie. There's nothing in him. It's not in his nature. It's not who he is. It's not in his character to lie. Which means also to not do what he says. And so some of the things that I wanted to talk about what he has actually promised us about his faithfulness. And so obviously the first thing that I want to main thing is to always the main thing is, which is the gospel, which is the good news. He is faithful with his good news that he says in Matthew 1:21. Matthew 1:21, and she will bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, and he will save his people from their sins. This is the gospel. And she will bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, and he will save his people from their sins. So another prophecy being spoken to, and later also fulfilled, that Jesus will be born, and he will save his people from their sins. So God sent his own son to die for our sins. And so also 1 Thessalonians 5, 9 and 10. For God did not appoint, 1 Thessalonians 5, 9 and 10. For God did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us. And God remains faithful to what He said. Sometimes we, maybe some of us in this gathering are questioning our salvation. We don't know if we are yet saved. And saved, I mean, we are in peace with God. Whether we have fellowship with God. And God continues to be faithful because He continues to call people unto Himself. For God did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, which is He is faithful today as well to save people, to have peace with people. And He's also asking you today that you would trust this word because He's faithful to His word. And He's still calling us into a relationship with Him. Let's also look another promise, Romans 11:25. Romans 11:25. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you be wise in your own opinion. That blindness in part has happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my covenant with them, when I take away their sins. This is the word of God, being another promise for us, that when I take away their sins. For we all have sinned. We all have sinned. And the promise of God, His faithfulness, is that I will take away their sins through Jesus Christ. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to always want to bring up as this gospel, that God is calling people to Himself through His faithfulness. Because for God so loved the world that He gave His only Son. And He desires to have a relationship with each one of us. He desires that we would be at peace with Him. And the only thing that's separating us and Him is sin. When we repent, when we say, God, I'm sorry for the things that I have done, the things that the sin nature that is in us. He is faithful to His word that I take away their sins. He will take away our sins. And so if anyone here is questioning their salvation, Word of God, this Word of God is true. And God is faithful today that that's what He says. He will take away our sins. And we become righteous with God. He's faithful. He cannot... The first thing that I said, God is not a man that He should lie. And that's what He says. This is where His Word. We have to trust and believe in His Word. Amen? Amen. And so, that's one of the... kind of the always I want to, I guess, emphasize and highlight this salvation, this gospel, this what we call good news, that why Jesus came. I have come to preach the good news. That's why Jesus came. And I was just listening to Johnny Erickson Tada. If you guys know, she's a quadriplegic. Am I pronouncing that right? And she was just sharing her testimony on one of the radio stations, and so I just one glimpse of it that that I wanted to share with you, and I just kind of yes. So I will continue with my message. The Lord must not want that to be shared today. And faithfulness of God. And so today I wanted to kind of bring it around, and what are we struggling with God's faithfulness with us? So one of the things that I listed here is, does God really love me? A lot of love, a lot of talk about love in the church. A lot of talk about, God loves me, I love God. But practically, how does that work out? Another thing is, sometimes we question, will He provide for me? Will God take care of me if I trust Him in this area? And so I wanted to let's open up 1 Corinthians 1:9. God is faithful. By Him you were called into fellowship with His Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. God is faithful. By Him you were called into fellowship with His Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. And these other things that I named, does He love me? Will He provide for me? Will He take care of me? Well, I'm worried about this. And when we believe this word, God is faithful. Thank you, Jesus. And why don't we stand for a second and pray for me for a minute here while I gather my thoughts a little bit. Hallelujah. Oh Lord, I ask you that you would help me to what I have on my heart about this, to let it flow out the way you desire this. Hallelujah. I need your help, need your wisdom, need the right words to be able to speak my heart, and that it's translated and it's received and it's grasped, so it can have an effect in people's hearts and in their lives. And I pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen. I'll maybe be seated for a second. And so when we talk about the faithfulness of God, How do we receive things that when we talk about Matthew 6:25? Matthew 6:25. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life. A lot of times in our life we worry a lot. And when we talk about the faithfulness of God is how do we receive this word from God where it says, this is what I tell you, do not worry about your life. Yet many times in our life, that's what we do, is we spend our time about worrying. And so this is where I want to draw my main message in my heart is that when he says, do not worry, do we trust that God is going to be faithful in this area as well? Or do we trust only God for our salvation? You know, I trust God for my salvation, but about these everyday things that happen in my everyday life, you know what? That's a little too much for me to trust. Because God says, don't worry about your life, what you will eat, what you will drink. But you know what? God doesn't really care, He doesn't need to worry about these details. I can take care of the little stuff on my own. You know, He won't worry. He won't take care of me in these areas. You know what? I have to go out and I have to work harder because if I don't provide, who else is going to provide? If I don't get a great education, what's going to happen with me? I'm going to be destined for poorness and solitude and like the cast out of society for the rest of my life. Yet God says, don't worry about your life. And when we read further on, I mean, it talks about not even worrying about your clothes and what you will eat. I mean, it's pretty radical stuff. And Jesus says, don't worry, and He will remain faithful to this. The Bible talks about, and I never seen a righteous man go hungry. And though He remains faithful to those words. When we trust those words, He remains faithful. But the question is, will we trust those words? I started my sermon with this testimony, and God is faithful to me. Every time that the bill comes, the credit card comes, God is faithful. I've received it. I mean, yes, I work, but it's this attitude that how do we receive Scripture and the things that He has promised to us in this Scripture. If He remains faithful, He's not going to back down. When He says, do not worry what you will eat and what you will wear, I mean, He literally means that you don't need to worry about that. But how often we find ourselves worried about that. Like, if I don't have the latest fashions, it's like the end of the world. God says, don't worry about it. He's going to provide. I mean, it says that Solomon, he compares it, and Solomon in all his splendor was not dressed as he provides for the the lily of the valley. I mean, he didn't provide for Solomon as much as he cares about a plant. I mean, how much more does He take care of you? And so when we talk about worry, Jesus says, do not worry. So do we receive that as faithfulness? A lot of ours, another aspect, we fear a lot. Oh, man, it's so scary. And what does Jesus say? Do not fear. Does God love me? What does God say?
Yeah.
God is love. What is one of the questions that I also raised? Will He provide for me? What's one of God's names? Provider. That's what the Word of God says. And then the question then to us, God is faithful. He promised these things to us. He said these things that He will provide for us. That do not fear, do not worry. That God is love. And then we so oftentimes get distracted and we think that God is not faithful to do all these things that He says He would do. All things work out for good to those who love God. And then we evaluate our life as, do we love God? I mean, if all things work out through good, even when the times when my house sale didn't fell through, the time that I got fired from work, the other time that I got fired from work, and then the other time that I got fired from, and then when my wife got fired from work, and then she got fired again. I mean, do I gonna trust God that He's gonna provide at that time? Or am I going to try to come up with my own genius ideas, which I tried and failed so many times? And God says, do not worry. Jesus says, do not worry. Are we going to be trusting God that He's going to remain faithful? I mean, when we translate this into our just everyday type of youthful life, I mean, we worry so much about jobs. We worry about so much our schooling. We worry about so much about our what people think about us. We worry about what our friends gonna think about us. We worry about our status. We worry about our looks. But at the end of the day, all these things, how much do they matter for? Versus our relationship with God. I mean, all these things that we worry about so much, that we fear so much, that we spend so much time and effort onto, really doesn't matter. Because out of our relationship with God, that's what's gonna be important. That is what's key. And God remains faithful in all circumstances. And that is my kind of trying to communicate my heart to you, that God is faithful. Even when we, like myself, when we run away and I try to create some kind of schemes, and I try to do sort of thing what I want to know, what I think is the right thing. And then God kind of crosses it all out and says, I'm faithful. I'm going to take care of you if you love me. Amen? Why don't we stand and pray in this prayer that I don't know where you are in life and what are some of the things that you're going through. Are you going through this, whether it's this, the fear of the future, the worry of tomorrow, feeling maybe inadequate or unloved. Maybe you're questioning your own salvation. Maybe you're worried about, will God provide for me? And I don't know which camp you fall into, or maybe there's some other camp that I didn't name. We are humans. Everyone is unique individuals. We all go through a different set of aspects and different set of experiences. And I don't know what you're going through, but I wanted to communicate this faithfulness of God from what God has been doing in my family over the last year. And I want to also encourage you and continue to press on that. Whatever you're faithful, if you love God and you're running after Him with all your heart and you want to have fellowship with Him, He promises that He will be faithful to you. And the biggest example is the Israelites. He said He's going to be faithful to them, and He continues to be faithful to them thousands and thousands of years later. And so in this prayer, I want to just pray with you. And as you have heard this message about faithfulness, that you just seek out your heart and where you may have doubted His faithfulness in your life, in which area. Whether will He provide for my schooling? Will He figure that out? What about my career? God, I'm already this old and I still don't know what I want to do in life. Will He take care of that for me? Will He take care of my future to be? He will. He will take care of these things. He will, absolutely. Let us pray and seek our hearts. Thank you, Lord. Hallelujah. Hallelujah, Lord. I thank you so much. I thank you so much for your faithfulness and your love towards me and my family. Lord, I pray, Lord, that my story that I have opened up and shared will encourage somebody else. And that as young people, they get into their careers and they start making a living and they run after you, you absolutely there will be tests in their lives. Absolutely, there will be a situation that you will put them in their life. Well, they will have to make a decision whether to be godly or to just go with the flow, or maybe just kind of be, just a white lie. And Lord, as I share my life with them, Lord, I want them to do the right thing. I want them to live a godly life. I want them to rely on your word where it says, do not worry, that if they follow you, if they make the right choices, if they are living godly lives and holy lives, that you will work it out. Even when it seems like there's just a brief, or even though it seems like there's no way out, you will provide for them, Lord. As I share my life with these young people, Lord, I hope that they will remember these stories, that you are faithful, that you say, when you say do not worry, that means do not worry about anything. Do not worry about clothes, do not worry about food, because you will provide for these things. The Gentiles worry about things, but not your people, not your children, because you will provide as long as we follow you. Oh, Lord, I pray for this for these young people. Jesus, that no fear may overcome them. Lord, that they will never feel inadequate or unloved, because your word, it says that you are love and therefore you love each one of them. In the name of Jesus, Lord. The ones who have truly experienced you and have tasted how good you are, I ask in the name of Jesus that the devil will never tell them, that they will never accept the thought that they are not saved and they don't have a relationship with you. I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. Lord, I pray for these young people. As I share my life and the life of my family, I pray that this lesson about faithfulness, that will fall into their hearts, that they may study this word, that this word is true. This is what we based our life on. Because if this word is not true, if this is all fake. Lord, we base that your word is true, and therefore you are faithful to complete. You are faithful to do what this word says. Jesus, we trust you. We trust you, Jesus. And so I bless every one of these young people. Lord, that they may trust you, that they may know you, that they may taste how good you are, and they may evidently see with their own eyes and in their own life how faithful you are and how you always come true, always come through, just in the nick of time. When there's no way out, you find a way out. And I pray this in your wonderful Son's name, Jesus. Amen. Be blessed, young people, church. We have a song.
So let's sing this last song here. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Whose love is mighty and so much stronger. The King of glory, the King of all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder. The King of glory, the King of all kings. This is amazing grace. This is a failing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King above all kings, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is a failing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. And this is amazing grace. This is a failing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Praise God.
Praise God for His faithfulness, for who He is. Anybody have any announcements? Sophia has an announcement.
Guys, hey, even though Andrew's not here, we still go out to the streets to proclaim the good news. So I invite all of you, especially the men, because I'm the only. I don't know if there's any guys coming. Tim, you coming? Okay, we're good. But yeah, guys, come.
No, we're not good. We need more men coming.
Also wanted to invite anyone who would like to participate once a month, first Sunday when we do communion at church. In the evening we have young people lead the service Sunday evening. It's at 6 o'clock, so that would be this Sunday. So if you would like to participate with a song, a testimony, the Bible talks about singing spiritual psalms, prophecies, hymns. Please use your talents. And this is an opportunity for young people. They give us this service, and we're grateful. And so please come see me if the Lord from today till Sunday around 5:30 maybe leads you in that direction to participate. God bless you.
So another monthly activity that we have is the Guys Conferences, which falls on the first Saturday of each month. And that happens to be tomorrow. So anybody over the age of 12 that's interested into growing in the Lord, engaging in awesome fellowship with guys your age, and awesome activities, please join us tomorrow here at church from 12 to 4 after street preaching.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so go street preaching, and then they can drive you straight to the guys' conference. See, look at that, all the men.
Yes.
Go from there to there.
I just wanted to just break a small high note. Who was here Monday and enjoyed the picnic? Okay. So on a voice level, based on how you enjoyed it, can I get a amen? Amen. All right. So thank you all those who helped and those who came as well.
Yeah, so the weekend's packed, and the week is packed too. Monday will be Bible study again, because the past Monday was Memorial Day. So 8 p.m. If you guys want to be prepared, go through the book of James, read it a few times. Those of you who weren't there and want to come, so that you're not behind. That's all I have to say. And then Wednesday is prayer at 6:30, or is it 7 now? 6:30. Prayer at 6:30. Then youth next Friday, 7 p.m. Come for prayer. And 7:30 fellowship. There's lots of donuts left over. Nobody's coming for fellowship. 7:30 fellowship, some coffee, some time with the Lord as well. Let's finish service with "Let the words of my mouth and meditation." God bless.